Hello, good afternoon. And it's just Justin here. Hi, Justin. Lovely to see you. All right. Hope everyone is having a good Sunday. Get my workspace ready to go, and then we'll get started. Okay. Close that. Close that for now. All right. Cool. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to talk about what we're going to do today, and then we will get to coding. So, real quickly, the agenda for today: we got last time uh, Regulator to a point where it was nominally working. And I think it's important to polish it. We had some issues with race conditions around is the regulator installed the first time you call the client, and make have the client make a request. And I think there was I shared the race condition with the original author Chris Keithley, and he said, "Yeah, we never really ran into that because we always installed them like at startup time on our app." I was like, "Yeah, that makes sense." So we'll probably do some shenanigans with generating a supervisor. Instead of using just the child spec, we'll generate a supervisor, one that installs the regulator at startup time. And then we'll also generate some functions in the builder to remove or install the regulator. So if you need to like change some configuration and then like make the regulator reboot essentially, we can make it do that. And then like we're kind of almost at the end. We really need to write some documentation. We've done a little bit as we went, but not nearly the level that I really would want to. I know it's probably not the most interesting thing to watch, but we're going to try that. And hopefully, our refactoring of a regulator won't take that long, and then we can get to, especially writing README examples. I think that we, I've spent a lot of time on stream talking about the motivation behind this client, why it existed in the first place, why I wanted to recreate it. But that really doesn't show in any of our documentation right now. It's like, why would you care about this? Why would you use this at all? Um, and that way we can sort of sell it to the community. And I think we might put in a task here, which is to publish a pre-release hex package. Um, I'm glad you are putting me on your television, Chris. That's cool. I don't know that I'm that entertaining, but anyway. So let's get to this point at least, because I think that what we can do is publish something that is basically the finished code for 1.0. Um, and then we can work on that documentation, and I can either do that on stream or off stream. If it's not compelling enough for the stream, maybe we won't do a session 9. We'll move on to some other topic, and then we can have it out there. You can use it. We can start talking about it on social media. We start sharing it around with the Elixir community, and then I can wrap up the documentation in my own personal time. All right, let's get started. So let's focus on polishing regulator. Uh, and just to refresh your memory and mine, what we did last time was we added regulator as an alternative to fuse for circuit breaking. So instead of having those hard limits, we have dynamic limits. And kind of tuning that is sort of out of the scope of this stream. I just wanted to provide it as an option. So our middleware that we built last time, it takes the options that would be passed to install to Regulator, and then it constructs a name for that regulator. So that'll be the registered name of the process that tracks the status of this particular dynamic rate limit. And then we ensure that it's installed with those options that are provided. And then before we make the request, we ask, is it okay? We get the token back that Regulator gives us if it's okay, and then we run the request. And then if the request should cause a back off in our capacity, we call this should regulate function that is provided in the options. If it should regulate, we register it as an error. If it shouldn't, then we register it as okay, and then we pass back the result. Now, if Regulator said, you're over the limit, we return basically the same value that the fuse middleware would return, which is unavailable. Okay, and then we wrote some tests for that, and these are probably going to have to change if we go to the big thing is this: it needs to be installed at the beginning, and we probably don't want to do Regulator uninstall. Okay, so that's an interesting thing to think about too. Do we? Yeah, let's figure that out. So let's look at the builder module. In our builder, we detected whether the strategy was fuse or regulator. And so we do raise a compile time error here if you give some option that is either fuse or regulator. And then we keep that here in the module, in a module attribute. And in the before compile callback, so this happens right before the compilation of the module is finished, we select which circuit breaker to use. So we use said circuit breaker. Regulator is not really a circuit breaker, but it serves the same purpose. And maybe we could call it fault detector. I don't know. Chris will probably get me on that. And then we inject that into our middleware stack. So behind retries, we call the circuit breaker, and so that's how we put that into our stack. But as I talked about just a moment ago, Regulator really should have this install call done at application startup time. So let's do something similar to what we did in the before compile, and generate a different child spec function. So this child spec function is what you would call to start up, or like will generate what the supervisor expects for a child process, and you would generally put this in your application startup. So before we just had it start the Finch client, and what we need to do, I think, and maybe we'll do it kind of sloppy first and then see how we can clean it up. So we need something that will call this on startup, right? And so we probably need we need to get some of this stuff here. We need to be able to get the options from the client. So we're gonna have to do some of this stuff separately. So let's go ahead and let's make a regulator child spec, and this is just gonna be a quote, right? So what we want to do is either use this one or this one we're about to write, based on whether they've selected regulator. Right. So maybe what we'll do, let's go ahead and do this with an if. So let's take this and we'll say if strategy is regulator, do this other thing. Oops. Else do this. And we've got to put that in quotes. Quote do. End. Right? And we need another end there. Okay. So then what we'll do, where we had this before, let's do unquote child spec. Okay. So here we need to do something like this. So let's go ahead and copy this, and rather than this child spec, so the problem is you can't return a list of child specs from this function. It needs to be a single child. So what we need to do is something more like supervisor.childspec, and then let's make a supervisor module. So this is like, let's do module dot supervisor, and then that takes nothing. So this will mean that we need a module in here, right? And maybe we should just call it soup, then it doesn't conflict, and we'll use supervisor. This macro will basically generate the machinery for a supervisor that we need. So let's look at that. Right, gen servers, child specs, child spec function. Yeah, okay, strategies. Okay. All right, so module-based supervisors. So we need to generate something like this, and then we need to generate an init, or we need to generate an init function. Okay. Okay, so we need a start link. Okay, and then we need an init function, and that takes an init arg that we're going to ignore. Now, one thing we could do, maybe we'll do this just so that it's consistent. We could potentially generate this supervisor regardless, and then based on whether this has regulator or fuse, do we start the child process that we need to, or rather just run it. We can actually run it right here. It doesn't need to be a child process. Do we install that regulator? Okay, so let's. Right, so this will start our supervisor, and what we have to return here is supervisor.init, and give it a list of children. Strategy 1 for 1. Just 1 for 1 is probably fine. If we need a different strategy, we'll look at that. So that's a supervisor strategy, not the fault detector strategy that we're talking about, right? Okay, so what is what do our children look like? And first of all, we definitely need this. Now the challenge here is this pool options belongs to the parent module. So what we need to do here is capture or compute what that parent module is, right? Because that pool options comes from there. Let's see. We are defining a nested module, so we could say client here, perhaps. The other thing we could do, yeah, let's do this. Let's say client module, and that's not going to work. So what I was going to do is like make a quote that uses the module like this macro, right? And that's not correct. Elixir LS is not correct because this is inside a quote. Well, let's just do it here. Client mod is, so we need to do module.split module. And this is not, this is not something I would normally do at runtime, but this is inside a supervisor startup. So you're only going to run this once. And okay, so this is going to give us, this module split is going to give us a list of strings. And then we are going to, let's see what we can do in the enum module. I just want to drop the last one, right? Could potentially use take. We could use reverse. Yeah, reverse, and then take the tail, and then reverse again. Probably not the best, but okay, so let's do enum reverse. So that's going to give us the module hierarchy in reverse order. And then we'll take tail of that. That's a built-in function. And then we'll enum reverse it. And then we'll module concat. Okay, so this is constructing the name of the module that the builder is being injected in. Now, one thing that's weird about using versus some of the other macros is that you don't get the macro env in here. And that's kind of frustrating. Let's see if, because we might be able to, actually we get caller. Why don't we use this? Actually, this is better. Returns the current calling environment as a macro env struct. All 9 liners. Okay, so let's see what the macro env struct has. The context, no guard match. Okay, modules. Okay, the current module name. The current environment can be accessed all times inside env. Okay. So actually, I was wrong. We are doing this the hard way. Okay, let's back that up, and we're gonna say, client mod is env dot module, right? So this is We could also do caller, I think. Let's try caller. I want to say it's this. Yeah. Okay, and then we can do unquote client mod. So that will call the pool options function on our client module. So this is the module where builder is injecting code. All right, and just before we go any farther, what I want to do is check that this generates the right code. Right, so the way we were testing that before, here we can do strategy regulator here. And then what we'll go, oh, hey, we got errors. Cannot compile hardhat.soup. Yes, I probably made a mistake there. Undefined variable ops. Oh, right. Okay. So this, right. So the init arg here, and we actually want to pass ops here to the child spec, and then we'll say options here. It is not strictly necessary, but then that will make it compile. No problems. Okay. So let's look at how that compiles. Mix decompile here. Let's just mix compile the whole project. Just to be sure. Okay. Decompile hardhat to expanded. Okay, and then if we elixir.hardhat, if we look at that, let's jump down to okay. That's interesting. Okay, so we can tell here it's calling hardhat.soup, right? So it's starting with that. What we want to decompile is hardhat.soup. And we just want to make sure that right, so it calls hardhat.poolOptions with the options given there. Okay, so that is correct. Note that the use supervisor is generating this child spec function. So this init arg will get passed through the start link here and into our init. Okay, so that looks correct. It's odd to me that it doesn't inject behavior supervisor, but you know, whatever. It doesn't actually matter for this case. Okay, so we're starting Finch under our own supervisor, and we need to install Regulator. So we're going to take this and generate this code as needed. So the thing that's weird about this is we are not supervising this process as part of our supervisor, which is interesting, because I think we should probably we should probably do that. Not directly, because this relies on being in part of the dynamic supervisor under the regulator app. Um, but what I mean is, when our client starts up, obviously what we're trying to do here is install. Um, but when our supervisor shuts down, it should also uninstall, right? Because it's going to be stopping the client anyway. So we might need to write a terminate callback. Um, let's go back to supervisor. Yeah, so let's see. That's the other option is that we do a task as a child. Um, Although I can really only do that as a one-shot thing. Let's think about that. It may be overkill, because when regulator shuts down, it's gonna clean up all of the installed regulators, but we might want to be able to control that better. Mostly just because it'll make testing easier. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's not do it here. Or rather, let's do install regulator. Let's make a function in there, um, that we generate into the client module that installs the regulator, and we can actually do it right here because we're switching on whether we're using fuse or regulator. So this is inside. Note this is inside. That actually shouldn't be have multiple arities. So we need to define that function. So let's install regulator. And that's going to do basically this. So we need to grab this code, except it's really going to be similar to this, right? Except we're not going to do env.module. It's going to be unquote client mod, right? So that'll do install. The other thing we could potentially do is do this outside, and then it's really just something we unquote. Yeah, so let's do regulator reg name. We were using reg name before. And we can say module concat client mod regulator. And then here we can do unquote the registered name. And this is not ops, but it's regulator ops, right? Because we defined that before. And maybe we pull this out here because we only need that should, or we need to remove that should regulate function. That's part of the options. So let's do keyword. It's keyword delete, right? Yep. Okay. So let's just keyword. Let's do it here. It doesn't need to be a separate thing. Should regulate. Should regulate. There, I can type. Okay. And what's wrong here? Syntax error there, right? No. Okay. So that installs a regulator. Let's do an uninstall function as well. Regulator dot uninstall unquote rig name. Okay, so now we're going to have ways to bump it as well. So we might note that this will call this regulator ops function, which has defaults in it. But if you define that based on some app env and you wanted to reinstall the regulator, we could make that a single thing. That said, this is probably fine. Let's recompile. And it looks like I need to restart Z. We'll do that in a minute. And then let's decompile that and decompile Hardhat and look at those again. Okay, so now this calls install regulator. So our regulator will be there on startup when our client starts. Okay, and then also let's look at that, and we should have, in addition to the child spec, we should have install regulator, right? So it generated this, and there should be an uninstall regulator as well there somewhere. Yep. Okay, actually at the top. Interesting. Okay, so that's looking good. And then let's maybe look at yep. Yeah, I'm almost tempted to go ahead and make this supervisor and then inject this optionally. That way our code is a little bit more uniform. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So we're gonna have to make this, and this is like not actually good anymore, right? I think that this is kind of like, this is pointless if we have this supervisor anyway, and then we can optionally install the regulator inside the supervisor. I think that's probably better, and then these can be injected in a separate block. So yeah, so let's take this. We want the whole thing here. Okay, let's take that out of there, and then let's put it here, and then this should become an unquote install regulator, right? Which can be either an empty quote, or it could be this thing that we had up here previously. So this is no longer going to be child spec. Let's change that out. This is going to be regulator funds. And we need to do an empty quote here. Okay. I'm not actually sure if you unquote nil, if you get, just nil kind of right there. Okay, and then we need, let's actually do this as a actually an empty quote might be the same as just an empty list. So we could see if that works. And then we could potentially do, this is install regulator. Regulator funds. And let's just return a tuple of 2 empty lists here. So I'm getting kind of deep in macro craziness here, but I'm just trying to make this a little bit smaller. Okay, so what's going on here? Unexpected reserve word. Oh, I need tuple, end of the tuple there. Let's kind of break that up and see if the formatter keeps it. Okay, cool. So we have, if our strategy is regulator, we get 2 functions injected and this. So here, unquote install regulator. It hasn't complained about that. That's good. We're not going to unquote child spec anymore. We are going to unquote regulator funds. Okay, let's see what it says. Yeah. Cannot invoke def inside a function macro. Okay, I don't know where we're doing that, but let's see what mixcompile says. Hardhat, soup, and knit. Oh, I have this switched. Okay. Okay. That should fix the problem. Go figure. Okay, so let's see if we can compile again. Okay, we're good. And then let's decompile that and see what our supervisor looks like. Okay, so there we're calling Hardhat install regulator. That's exactly what we wanted. And then let's decompile the other one. This is really, I find this tool decompile essential. Okay, so we're getting the uninstall regulator injected, and we're getting install regulator injected as well. Okay. Cool. So now that we have the machinery to start up the client backend using Finch and install the regulator on startup based on what strategy they picked. Let's really quickly make sure that the other one works as well as the empty case. Okay, so we should not, in here, we should not have install regulator. Nope, okay. But we should have child spec. Yeah, the child spec is still calling Hardhat soup, right? Okay, and then let's look at the soup, and it just puts an empty list in there. So that's mm, probably not what I want. Let's look at quote. Yeah, okay, so that represents a function call. I don't think this is a case where we need to be concerned. It's uh, let's try. Let's go in here and let's change these two empty lists to empty quotes. And see how that changes it. Because I think that we kind of want the empty AST there, but I'm not sure what an empty quote looks like in terms of the AST. So, yep, let's. I'm assuming that what happens is you put that empty list at the module level and it just throws it away because there's nothing to be done there. But for the supervisor, okay, so it actually quotes nil. Yeah, you know, let's just do nil, and then be done with it. Like there's no, I mean, it is a little confusing, but there's no runtime cost for that. So that atom exists already. You're not constructing it for the first time, so I'm not incredibly worried. And then that's a bit better than that's a bit better than an empty list. Okay, so that was with strategy fuse. Let's test real quick that it works without, which I don't think should have changed. Yeah, okay, so that still compiles. All right. Yep. Okay. So, obviously, the other thing we could do if we really, really wanted to in the builder here is like not put the fuse, not generate the fuse stuff. Um, I don't know. We do have that in defaults, so it's kind of weird to only generate these. When we're using that strategy, but we always have the options. Yep. Um, oh, cool. You're not going to let me rename that symbol. All right. This is a good time to restart and update Zed because they seem to be releasing all the freaking time. Let's see if we can rename that symbol. No, you're not working. Okay. So da, 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 da. Yeah, there's no find and replace functionality in Zed yet. Okay, so I'm gonna I'm going to pull this out because I think that this is unwieldy. We got it to work, but this is kind of unwieldy. And let's just generate this all the time, even if you're not using it, because we generate the fuse options. Why do we not, generate these, right? Um, and we can put doc false on them for now. I don't know that it's strictly necessary. Um, but in fact, we might want to put documentation on them later, but they're kind of right now internals. So this will give us the opportunity to do this, pull this out, and then let's get rid of that, right? And since we're not returning a tuple, that if will just return nil, sorry. So install regulator is that. And then let's, oh, you're not going to let me rename. So let's say regulator name. And then wherever we use it down here, right? Okay. It'll be in here, regulator name. And then we can do the same here. Okay, so now we'll always have those functions. That if block up here at the top is a little less gnarly. And then we don't need this unquote regulator funds because there is none. We just put them down here. And I want to start putting location keep on all these. This means, by the way, if I recall correctly, this option on quotes means that you will, when it reports a line number, it's going to report it from where the macro is, rather than the line number where you used the macro. So it won't report, hardhat dot, use line 2 or whatever. It's going to say, oh no, it's in hardhat.builder this line if there's a compilation error. So I think that's usually a bit more useful. It really annoyed me in the past when I was working with Phoenix and they had all the macros everywhere and then they don't use location keep, and it's like, well, it looks like it's my problem, but it's actually your problem. That said, the macros we're creating here are way simpler than anything Phoenix does. Okay, so we kind of refactored that. Let's go back over to our regulator middleware. Now that we don't need to install, the thing is, this could still crash if it's not installed, right? So what I would like to do is let's not ensure that the regulator is installed. Instead, I want to fail fast. Like, if you didn't set it up right, that's your problem. If you somehow stopped it and didn't reinstall it, then you should get a slap on the wrist. So, okay, keyword. Here, let's use fetch. Right, so because we only care about this. We don't need pop anymore. Keyword fetch, because we're not going to install the options. Okay. But what we will do is we'll do this. So similar to what we did last time. How do people feel about with for this case? Let's do it. Why not? With is fun. Okay, so we're going to do this. Okay, token. Excuse me. Okay, so the with statement is sort of like it generates nested cases. And then we'll put this, oops, want the whole thing. Okay, and then we need some other options. So if we get false, we're going to say error not installed. And then let's give the reg name. That way, they're going to be like, what the heck is this? Let's be really verbose here with that. Regulator. Okay, regulator. And then we can put the other clause, which is dropped. Okay, and then we'll remove this case because we completed that. So now we're saying we're checking ahead of time if the PID is started. So if the regulator is started, then process whereas will return true for his PID. And then we can call regulator ask and get a token. If we don't get a token, of course, we're going to drop. If this is false instead of true, we'll go to this clause. And there should be no other possibilities here except crashing. Which it might still be possible here. Remember we had that race of startup, but if you are putting, let's go back to our builder here and talk about that real quick. If you're putting this supervisor in your supervisory tree, so first of all, if you aren't saying start up my client, then you're not going to get any HTTP requests because we're not starting the Finch pool. Unlike some other clients, it doesn't start it up automatically in the background. You have to explicitly start it, which is by design, and it's why I picked Finch for this. And then, so that means that, if you're not putting this process in your supervisory tree, then you're never going to call install regulator on it, and you're not going to start the child. So it's just gonna bail. And I think that it's fine that this crashes in that case. It's going to crash with no proc. It's a little bit obtuse. Maybe something that we could make more friendly in the future. Okay. That's a little bit smaller. Now all of our tests are going to fail now. So what we're going to do here, we're going to uninstall the regulator before we do this. So we still need to have async false on here. We can't reasonably run these tests in parallel because the metrics inside the regulator are designed to be used concurrently. But we want to test individual things about our setup here, so our integration. This test does not need to change. Okay, so here's one we need to just dump this, right? Because and here's an interesting thing. We don't need to do that. We can do test client uninstall regulator. Haha. Okay, so we don't want it to install. we want it to maybe just make this a happy path test. The other thing we could do is we could change this to crashes when the regulator is not installed. That's probably better. So we're going to do this. We'll say test client uninstall regulator. And then we are not going to do that. We actually want to have an assert raises around that. Or is it assert raise? I know we went through this last time. Assert raise. Okay. And then that takes a function. And I think it was argument error. Argument error. And then because that's not going to find the does not and does not automatically install it. Now, actually, this is not true because we just changed that. We want to say that returns not installed error when regulator is missing and does not automatically install it. Okay, so this is not assert raise. What we want is just an assert match. Error not install, or regulator not installed, right? Because we just wrote this code. Test client dot regulator is the one that the name that it's expecting. And there's no end needed there. Okay. So okay. Right, so we're making sure that it's uninstalled. So we turned it off. And then we should get this error because in our middleware we checked whether that process is alive, right? And then before, so we're checking that before we ask whether we can proceed with the request. Okay, so I think that's probably a better test here. These tests are probably fine because they didn't rely on having the thing uninstalled before we do anything. All right, let's run the tests. Let's first compile. Okay. Mix test. Yeah. Okay. So interesting. Failed to start child soup. Already started. I think we're missing something here in our child spec. And since I changed that around, here, let's do that and see if it fixes it. I don't think that's it, but yeah. Okay, and the problem here is that named process is already started. Um, I think I should be doing this. If anyone has ideas, jump in there. I think this has to do with how our test is starting it, right? And we're starting this. Oh, here's our problem. We are naming this after the supervisor module, and actually we want to name it after the client module. That was easy. And actually I want to back out these changes I made a moment ago because they're not relevant. Yeah, okay, so we were trying to name the Finch process the same as the supervisor that we just started. There's one little bit of code I didn't change. So, okay, so now we're testing. Okay, so here we actually have an error because we never made it there, right? So this should be stub. Oops. The other thing we could do is just remove this expectation. Yeah, let's remove this because we don't need to do anything with bypass, and then just if I don't know that we need to do this even. Let's try it without. Let's see if it passes. Excuse me. So we don't set an expectation. Yeah, it shouldn't fail without any expectations set. Okay. So that means we can remove this because we don't care about bypass. Okay. So now, okay, this is a bit better. We have our regulator starting up when our client process starts. We've put it under a supervisor, so if we ever need to add any other children to this, another thing we might be able to do here is if it's not regulator, then maybe we should run fuse install. And then that will save a bit of time with the first time you hit the fuse middleware. That's maybe some enhancement that we could do later. In the meantime, we have the ability to install and uninstall. So I'm not going to make a reinstall function. I thought about that earlier, but I don't think that's strictly necessary. Somebody can do that on their own, or if they ever have to bump the regulator state administratively, this is kind of something that I don't necessarily want to make easier. You should be thinking about what you're doing. So, and also know that if you run this, if you change some settings, you run this uninstall, and then you run that reinstall, there's going to be a period where your clients are erroring because they get this regulator not installed message. Okay. I think we're good for a commit. Let's read the test one more time. Okay, so use the regulator instead of fuse. returns not installed error when regulator is missing, does not automatically install it, right? That's what we were testing here. And then it normally invokes regulator for requests. Okay. Yep. And then the same down here. Court's errors on should regulate. So we are getting result error. That stuff doesn't need to change. Okay, so let's make a commit. Mix format. Mix format. Thanks. Okay, let's look at the diff. So we're pulling some stuff out to the top. We made a supervisor module. We updated the child spec to spawn the supervisor module rather than just Finch. And then we added the install and uninstall regulator functions. And then we simplified the regulator middleware. It checks whether the regulator exists before it attempts to ask. I don't think we can reasonably simulate that race that we were experiencing last time, so I'm not going to bother. And then, yeah, so we have that new error return. And then we are ensuring that it's uninstalled before we start, right? And then we check when it is missing, when it is uninstalled, that we return that error. And I think we're good on that. So let's add those files. Start regulator when the client, or let's say install regulator when the client starts up, and return error tuples if not started. Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot. I had it update dialyzer, fixed dialyzer. So thanks to Pendabot. Okay, now we can push. All right. Let's look at our agenda real quick. Okay, so we made it install at startup time, and we generated functions to remove and reinstall. Okay, so we're getting a good point to publish a pre-release package, I think. That will be good. It's been since, I think, the first session that I last published one. So let's go into our mix.exs and update this. So I'm gonna go 1.0. I don't know why people always publish. It was fine when we were in development to call 0.1. whatever. But we're gonna do RC1. So the reason why I'm doing this is I think the functionality is mostly complete here. What we have to do is update docs. And that that doesn't require us to. I think it's release candidate ready. Yeah. Okay, so licenses MIT links. Do we get the docs generated automatically? Let's have a look. Hardhat. Let's search for that. Hey, it's there. The docs probably look like nothing. Yeah. So we we'll want to do some handcrafting of this. And I'll have to refresh my memory on how we do. Yeah, see, this it doesn't do anything. Right, and this is, way back at this version, we only had pool options for starting. Okay, so let's go ahead and push, and we'll see. Maybe we can see in the meantime what the documentation looks like. Docs. Deps.get. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so let's open docindex.html. So this is what our documentation looks like right now. That's kind of weird. Okay, and we can do some things like that's another thing we're going to need to update. That's probably simple. We'll want to organize this, so you can group modules into specific sections. We'll probably do that. But let's go ahead and let's add a commit, and then we're gonna bump version to 1.0.0 rc.1, and we're gonna get tag that 1.0.0 rc.1, and we'll push, and we'll push tags. Okay, so now we have a new tag. It'll be tagged there on GitHub. Let's do mixhex.publish. So this is going to publish this stuff that we included, and it'll generate the documentation. I hope that's the password. Yeah. Like I said, it's been a couple months since I pushed anything. Okay. So then we can look at the docs on hex docs. They're probably the same as what we just saw locally. And let's just hit Hardhat again. It hasn't published. Oh no, there it goes. Okay. Okay, let's look at xdoc. I don't have it installed. Oops. Come on, Dash, work with me here. I was trying to hit the preferences. Xdoc. Yep. Okay. Okay. So we have this. Okay. So we can modify this docs entry. In our project definition. We're not going to bother with a live book. Right. Okay. So that's about that. I want to find out about the. I don't need to render those things. How to use cheat sheets. Okay. Let's go back. There we go. This is what we want. Mix docs. Okay. Configuration. What's that name? Here are the options that we want to work with. Default true, it's fine. Okay. So we definitely want extras. Let's start there. So I'm going to try to get some of this on the same page. Let's add the docs key, and we'll make a function down here, like we did for package docs. And we want to do, so we have extras. We want readme MD, right? Because that contains our readme. Now, the other thing that we could possibly do is not do that, because the readme is injected into, the readme is injected into the Hardhat module. So yeah, let's actually not do that. Okay. So main, yep, let's do that, and we'll test this locally to be sure that we're doing the right thing here. Main, we want to be Hardhat, because that'll get the, that's like this, except this is the old version. Yeah, so we get that injected, and you get all the stuff in here. Looks like we're gonna have to clean up the functions that are injected by Tesla. And I kind of want to say that we should have an option to the builder macro that will possibly print these things. Because, for example, like, should regulate is, that's generated by a def delegate. This is kind of weird. What's this? Okay, so let's real quick mix docs. Okay. Oh my goodness, they've got CSS problems galore. Yikes. This is, I don't know what this, oh, is it just the width of my browser? That is ugly. It's not supposed to look like that. Let's copy that and like try to open it in like Chrome or something. No, looks just the same in Chrome. Sorry, that was in my other window where you can't see it. Okay. Yeah, okay. So, close Chrome now. Okay, so we have, this is the main page. There are these other modules. Oh, jeez. Somebody messed up. I feel like I should roll back the version of Xdoc. To a different version. This is 0.30.6. 0.30.6. Let's restrict this a little bit. Let's just set it to 0.30.5 and see if that fixes it, because that is broken. Okay. Yeah, they did something wrong. That's what it's supposed to look like. Yikes. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so you can see, we're getting the README in there. I hope there's an issue filed on that already. I'm going to put a note in here. Let's remove that. We'll put recon back in there if we need to. Upgrade note. Upgrade xdoc past 0.30.6 when they fix the broken CSS. Okay. Because that was disturbing. I was like, why is that so weird? Okay. So we got the main. So if we go to index.html, we should get it showing this page. So you can see it redirected to that page. That's what we want, because this is going to have all the stuff that we care about in it. And like API reference, not that useful. Okay, so then let's make some groups, or a dash code. Okay, so there's groups for extras, groups for modules, groups for docs. Let's look at the groups section down here. Right, so we want to say groups for modules, and you can see here they're like, yeah, you can group them like so. So let's go ahead and do that. Groups for modules, and we want to say middleware. Thanks for coming, Justin. And we want to put. So I think you can use patterns for this. Right, so you can use a pattern. So what we can do is we can say the pattern should be. We'll just use that similarly. A regex or a string name of the module is also supported. So for now, let's do Hardhat dot middleware, and then let's run the docs and see if that groups it the way we thought. I did not do that right somehow. Okay. What do we do run? Basic. I don't think basic is the right word there, but okay. So what did we get? We got it not printing the middleware ones. Oh, this is fun. It's been so long since I've used xdoc, seriously. All right, so because this is not plain nice, we're just going to do it like so. And I don't I think the order matters here, maybe. Actually, probably doesn't. The other possibility is that that regular expression didn't match anything. Regulator. Let's see. Let's put some line breaks in here for my sanity's sake. Okay. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know if this is going to make a difference here. I think there might even be a bug in Xdoc. We traded one bug for a different one. Um, okay, so we can group functions and callbacks too. That's interesting. Okay, we may not need to do that. Hmm. We could try that nest modules by prefix, perhaps. Because I think this is not working. Groups for modules. I don't understand why. I also seem to recall, and maybe they've changed things, that it used to be a map and not a list. But I'm not entirely convinced of that. Let's try that nest modules by prefix instead. That might be an easier way to achieve what we want. So let's delete that nest modules by prefix. Hardhat.middleware, and let's see if that does what we want. Ha. Okay, so we kind of got what we wanted. And let's see if we can do. I'm guessing that there's sort of an order on this. Let's see if that doesn't eliminate the top level one. Okay, so not sure how I feel about that. It's probably fine to have that prefix and then the others be top level. Yeah, so let's first of all go in here and clean some things up, because this, we shouldn't be generating anything for this, right? And right. Right, so this should definitely have module doc false on it. And there, I left this comment here. I think we should reassign ops at this point. And maybe we do like this, or is it strategy ops? Yeah. Let's not do that. That's just messing our stuff up. So I want to do ops equals the original ops, keyword delete strategy. And is there put new? Does that crash? Keyword put new. Unless the key already exists. Right, so what I want to do here is put docs false. And then when we get here, when we unquote that into use Tesla builder, it won't generate the docs that we see here, right? So it won't generate this, it won't generate get head, etc. It won't generate the documentation for those. In fact, they'll be doc false. And then I think we can do we definitely need to do doc false on the child spec. Implementation detail. And then we just do doc false on all these, because those are delegated to the other module. And then we have it on all these. We have def overwriteable. So that should clean up our main page. There is a question here about whether we should document some of these things. But I'm kind of leaning on the defaults module being well documented instead. We could argue that these should have documentation. Maybe we'll do that in a little bit. Okay, so let's run mix docs again, and hopefully this page should be cleaned up a bit. Okay, and it got rid of our modules again. Cool. Why? I'm actually just genuinely shocked that people aren't complaining that this stuff is broken. It used to work. Okay. So now we're not, we're hitting this main page, but we're not getting the methods injected, and that's exactly what I wanted to get removed from there. Remember that gets injected because we do use Hardhat builder inside the Hardhat module, partly so we could test the macros, but also so that if somebody just wants to start Hardhat and use it without modification, they can do that. I have considered, we did in the original version have a top level supervisor for the app, and we had an application behavior that would look at, well, do you want to start the client automatically? And I think that, and it would default to false. But that's not really necessary for this. I think it's pretty important to make sure that we don't invite that. That's the same sort of problem that we got into with using some other HTTP clients, where they would automatically start up connection pools, and then everybody just used the same connection pool, and you ran into all sorts of problems. Okay, so um, yep, okay. So path params, right? So we need to add docs for regulator and for timeout, and I think it's important to talk about um, why we have these two overridden. Um, yeah. Okay, and we can maybe add some extra stuff here. Yeah. Okay. Let's go in and let's look at close out our tests. I think this is a good place to start from. I kind of wish that I'd gotten that nesting to be able to work, but we can probably figure that out on a future stream, or I might do that on my own. Um, um, I want so this is we expect this header option in this middleware. Um, and in the defaults, there's deadline propagation ops. Right, so I think we should expects header option to be expects a header option which defaults to deadline. C hardhat dot defaults dot deadline propagation ops 0. Okay. Propagates deadline information to the server being called via an HTTP header. Okay, that's probably slightly clearer. Expects a header option which defaults to deadline. Okay, when we say, and maybe this is underscore to make it italics, this middleware is part of the default stack. Let's see how that looks. Right. Okay. It put a line break in there that I don't like. Let's just remove that and see. It may actually do that automatically. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, it's just the line's too long. If I shrink, nah, it's still gonna do that. Okay. And that is correct, right? That is part of the default stack. Yep. We do that first. Okay. So that's quite a bit better. Um, false. I don't think so. We don't need it. Oh, it wasn't printing that anyway because it was a behavior implementation. So I don't think we need that doc false. But we need to make sure that we have this impl Tesla middleware on all of our other stuff that we create. Right, and then we could jumps here. Um, is the name of the header added to the request? Right. Okay. So that's a lot clearer. That's pretty good. All right, let's look at path params. Let's see what it looks like in here. And let's use that same text that we did in deadline propagation to make sure that we're showing this is something that's included. The other option we could do is say, like, don't document this module, because other than illuminating that we have this different behavior, we aren't actually yeah, it's not like something that they can really configure. All right, well we'll just go with that for now. Let's write some documentation for Regulator. Cool. Okay. So limits concurrent requests. I probably want to use some language here that Regulator itself uses for this module doc. Adaptive concurrency limits. Let's see, AMD. Okay, so we'll use this language, and that way we'll be consistent with them. Limits concurrent by based on loss-based dynamic limit algorithm. Okay, so and then we'll do a link here. I think this is how you do it. Regulator, or maybe I'm remembering Rust documentation. We'll see. let's check that real quick. In Rust documentation, RustDoc, you can use the backticks as links. I don't know if that actually works. Oh, that does work. Yay! Okay, cool. So okay. This middleware is part of the default stack when giving the strategy regulator option to use Hardhat. Okay, and then let's put that in there. And then let's say C boy, it really loves injecting alarm handler in my documentation here. Hardhat.defaults.regulator ops 1 and hardhat.defaults should regulate one. Okay, let's generate that. Okay. That's pretty good. What amounts to an error? Okay. It's not great language, but let's see. All right. Documentation is not the most fun thing to watch me code. But I want to make sure that we have some bases for the documentation for the individual middlewares that we customized, or that we created ourselves in the case of regulator and deadline propagation. And yep. All right, this one looks good. Right. Okay. So let's look at timeout. Looks like we have some cleanup to do here. It's interesting that this... Oh wait, that's doc, not module doc. There's part of our problem. It was putting that on this function. Okay, so we already found a problem in there. Right. Okay, so we need to add another list item here. Because we need to talk about how this is different from the default Tesla middleware. Includes we should probably talk about what the span event is. So I think that's sufficient. And then let's say deadline support. Okay, so let's make a section here, and I don't know whether I should use double or triple there. Let's look at this. Well, first of all, let's remove that and generate the docs again, because that's supposed to be module doc, and then that'll explain why it actually... Okay, so that's better. I think open telemetry. Let's make that a section, and we'll add a deadline. And let's just type some garbage there for now, and see what that looks like on the docs page, and then we'll clean that up, because I want to talk about specifically what is the format of that event that we add, and then also what does it mean to have deadline support. Okay, so sections, open telemetry, deadline. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we'll go with the okay. So implementing a timeout necessitates moving the request into a new process, and then applying the timeout to that new process's execution or completion, right? Since open telemetry, we'll just tracing context is stored in the process dictionary, that context must be explicitly propagated to the new request, the new process. We use or say this middleware uses open telemetry process propagator to achieve this, to achieve the propagation. Okay. So that describes what we mean by propagation. And then let's talk about the event. In the event of a timeout in a timeout result in this middleware, a new timeout exceeded event will be added to the trace. And then the timeout event will include these attributes. Module, the client module. So one thing here that I didn't talk about, but I keep coming back to is, yeah, there's open telemetry semantic recommendations for that sort of thing, and we should probably use like code.namespace or whatever. That the client module that includes this middleware, and then excuse me, the timeout, right? That's the other field in here. The duration that was exceeded. Okay. And let's remove these, because the thing about OpenTelemetry is that we are using atoms here. That's for both the name of the event and the attributes added to the event, but that's really just for saving memory. When they're emitted in the trace, they become strings anyway. So when they're exported, so we don't really need to, use that initial colon to indicate that those are atoms. Okay, so we'll deal deadline in a second. Let's look at how those look. Okay, moving the request into a new process, then applying the timeout to that. Why don't we say applying is not great, and then waiting on that new process's completion. Or aborting after the timeout. Okay, so that's just sort of we're trying to explain why context propagation matters here, and that I think the user of this middleware, because this is not part of the default stack, the user of this middleware should be aware that this is going to spawn a new process. That's part of the behavior. Okay. Well, we don't need this. The event will include these attributes because we know we just said a new timeout exceeded event will be added to the trace. Okay. Okay, when the caller has set a deadline for the current process using deadline, well, we just has set a deadline. That limit will be respected by this middleware. In the case that the supplied timeout option is less than the current deadline, or honestly, we can just say the timeout chosen will be the lesser of the time remaining on the current deadline, and I kind of want to put some emphasis on this. Let's put lesser of the time remaining on the current deadline and the duration given in the timeout option. Okay, right, because that's what we do here. When I say the effective timeout chosen. When the caller has set a deadline for the current process, that limit will be respected by this middleware. The effective timeout chosen will be the lesser of the time remaining on the current deadline and the duration given in the timeout option. Okay. Let's see how she looks. I don't, this is kind of, it feels a bit choppy. The options is fine. I kind of want to move this into the description for this middleware. So maybe let's go. Okay, so timeout after X milliseconds. Propagating open telemetry. Or the current deadline. Open telemetry context and emitting trace events on timeout HTTP requests after a duration. I would actually say abort HTTP requests after after a given timeout or the current deadline. Propagating open telemetry context and emitting trace on failure or on expiration. And then we can kind of like get rid of that. Like, because I want to simplify it, but also, you know, it's not like a hit list of things. I want to say that this is, we abort HTTP requests after a given timeout or the current deadline, propagating open telemetry context, and the problem here is this does not add the propagation headers, so I want to be careful about that. So respecting open telemetry context. Let me just say open telemetry trace events on expiration, because I think it is important, like I said before, it is important that the user knows that we have to spawn a new process to implement this timeout. The given timeout, and emit open telemetry traces on timeouts. Okay, because we do want them to know about this extra process, but also for what the thing is, they don't need to care. If they just want to put it in there and say, hey, my timeout is this, they don't really need to care that OpenTelemetry requires us to copy. Like, that's an implementation detail. In the detailed explanation, it's fine to talk about that. But I think that sorry, I want to reword that a little bit. But if they're just like, well, what is this middleware? And the summary of it is, well, we do this. Excuse me. We abort requests after the given timeout, or you can use the deadline if you supply it, and you get open telemetry trace events on timeouts. That's really all. That's a really terse summary of what it does, and we don't have to have that bullet list. But then we also have the additional explanation down here um, about propagation, as well as what the contents of the event are. Okay, I'm satisfied with that, and I'm sorry like for belaboring that so much. I just want that to be really pretty tight, and the description that the Tesla middleware had that we cribbed this from was just not sufficient. Okay. Um, I think this is a good place to stop. But what we're gonna do is, before I do that, um, we're going to make a commit. Okay. We're going to improve. We're going to improve documentation for all middleware modules. And oops. So here, let's we did that. Let's get a more detailed commit message here. Okay. So this is improve xdoc documentation. And we're going to remove auto-generated docs from use Tesla. And then we're going to add improve docs for all middleware modules. And we're going to pin X. We said we pin xdoc to the previous tiny release to avoid a CSS bug. Okay. And that should have made the commit. Okay, let's push. And then I'm going to bump the version again. And that'll be the end of our stream for today. RC2. Bump version 0.0 RC.2. And then we'll do, let's do get tag 2. Let's push and push tags. Okay. And then let's mix hex.publish. Yes. Okay. We got the docs pushed. And this was our local version. Let's refresh that. And we got RC2. What I didn't check was, did it jump to the main? Okay, let's try that. No, it went to the API reference first. For some reason that's not working. We can figure that out next time. Let's have a look. And that is not working. That's interesting. Okay, so for next time, we did this, and we wrote module docs for a middleware. We did not create README examples, so I think that's a good topic for next session. So let's do, or I might do it on my free time, but let's create README examples. We're going to debug xdoc on hex because it really should not be using a different version. Yeah, see, this is actually using the version that oh, maybe I just needed a refresh. Oh, this is messed up. Yeah, there's something seriously wrong with this version of xdoc. Um, but yeah, so our defaults, we got all the docs there. Let's look at this one. This looks better. Path params. Okay, so we're basically getting all the stuff that we talked about before. Okay, cool. So that's sufficient for now, but it really bugs me that they were using a different version of xdoc, and you can't just tell it use this version. Okay. And let's put this down here. Okay. All right. I think that's a pretty good place to stop. Um, and yeah, thanks for coming, and thanks for saying hi. And we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone. Cheers.